Y'all, hope it don't rain.
The itsy bitsy spider climbed up the water spout. Down came the rain and washed the spider out. Out came the sun and dried up all the rain. So the itsy bitsy spider climbed up the spout again.
I'm just going up this water spout, y'all. Hope it don't rain. I'm an itsy bitsy spider. I'm also a good hider. Y'all ain't gonna find me.
The itsy bitsy spider climbed up the water spout. Down came the rain and washed the spider out. Out came the sun and dried up all the rain. So the itsy bitsy spider climbed up the spout again.
Going up this,
Up the spout again.
going up this.
Up the spout again.
Here we go. Good morning, everybody. I'm back again with Chris Porrow, my co-host, and the special guest today is Tim McCanna. And this is the latest in my series of chats about, I'm hosting these live streams to promote Where's Itsy Bitsy Spider, Kickstarter for a new book. And the reason I brought Tim on today is that he's a children's book writer who I met as part of the Society of Children's Book Writers and Illustrators, which Tim was you were quite involved in organizing their events.
I was on the regional team. Yeah.
Yes. And I'm going to turn you up a little. You're a little quiet there. There we go. And yes. And, then we met more recently at Comic-Con where you were dressed as a Vulcan. Was I right in that? Or at least you're in the Starfleet.
We were red shirts. I don't think we had any ears, but Ken and I were both in red Star Trek gear. So yeah, we got a lot of thumbs up from people at that con.
Yes, definitely. So then I realized, we probably had a lot more to talk about. Yes. So I'm so glad you could join us, and also be quite a relevant guest because Itsy Bitsy Spider is a children's book. Yeah. Yesterday I had my friend who'd written a book, Fake History. So we were sort of talking a little bit more seriously about history and things like that, which was relevant to the book because I do have there's a sort of history fair scene and all this sort of stuff. And so Itsy Bitsy Spider sort of bits all over the place. But I'm really interested in talking to you about the craft and process of writing children's books and in the audience of all that. So why don't you tell me a little bit about how you got into children's books and the Society of Children's Book Writers and Illustrators, or the SCBWI, or various pronunciations.
Yeah, well, I mean, like many people, I got into picture books because I had two young kids I was reading picture books too, and I had no plans to become a picture book author at all, but just kind of fell in love with all these stories that I was I was like in search of content to read to my kids, at bedtime, and would go to bookstores and libraries, just kind of looking for anything to entertain them with, and really fell in love with just the whole form. And I'd written musicals and been musical and in bands and been in theater. So I had a storytelling background and thought, well, how hard could it be? I'll just, whip out some stories and submit them, and I'll be published in a year or so. And of course,
it seems like it should be very easy. Everyone thinks, I can be a children's book.
It seems like a lot of people give it a try too. A lot of celebrities.
Yeah. So it took some time, and of course, the first bit of advice that anybody gets when they say, "Hey, I'm interested in writing picture books," is join SCBWI, which is the Society of Children's Book Writers and Illustrators, and that organization has been around for 50 years, and it's just a great way to meet other people. Like Chuck and I met at probably Illustrator. They have in our regional area, we have a chapter of SCBWI, and then you meet people in your area and you become friends and you network and you see each other's work and support each other and you learn about the industry. And that's kind of the whole point of SCBWI. And it's also,
it's kind of become really almost the established pathway for getting into children's books. I mean, if you want to do it, I mean, they put on great seminars. You arranged an illustrator's workshop in San Francisco at Fort Mason that I attended a few times. And, then there's a local area chapter down in Asilomar that they have a conference for so it's a several days long. It's like a weekend conference down there. Aslomar Conference Grounds near Pacific Grove, which is a very awesome place. That's incredible.
Beautiful.
And then there are big conferences like in LA and New York. And all the sort of children's book editors and writers, really, the editors and publishers are all there. They'll give talks at these things. They'll tell you what to do. But they it's definitely a sort of certain form of the children's book. And so I'm a little bit like, as a cartoonist, I'm a little outside of that, because like cartoon is not necessarily like what's been looked for in the children's book market, where they're looking more for more I guess not hard outlines. I mean, to put it bluntly. Although your latest book, Peach and Plum, which you've illustrated yourself, you are doing a more cartoony. So there is this sort of style that's sort of come in from Scholastic a lot more. So it is a lot more acceptable now than it used to be.
Yeah,
for sure. Hard lines.
Sorry.
What are hard lines, Chuck, for people that
kind
of
like sort of outline, as your character's outline in a sort of cartoony way, versus not having an outline.
It's
say
just like a shape,
books,
a colored shape.
They don't really have outlines a lot of the time.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So I was enjoying being a part of SCBWI and getting a lot out of it, and decided to volunteer for my regional chapter, and spent 5 years sort of volunteering and helping organize Asilomar, and got published eventually, and had a few picture books come out. And then recently, as you said, Chuck, I had some time during the pandemic to kind of dabble in other parts of picture booking and children's booking that I hadn't done, which was illustrating, although I had a background in graphic design for advertising. And so Peach and Plum is my first book that comes out this year. It's like an early graphic novel for emerging readers, so like your kindergartners and first graders that are looking to read books on their own, and it does have sort of a comic panel feel to it.
Yeah. Okay. Yes.
So and the characters do have those sort of hard outlines, but that's Peach and Plum, and it's been really fun. It's been a joy to kind of dive in, and I have a whole new appreciation for illustrators. My gosh, it's a ton of work.
Normally you're doing the writing.
Yeah, I kind of had an idea. I suspected that when I wrote my story, which is why I never thought it would get done. Which is why I contacted Chuck immediately, because I was like, it'll never get done. I was like, this is going to be a lot of work, most of the work.
It was very fortuitous with Chris, because yes, he wrote the story, but I had just been to a sort of weekend seminar hosted by Leah Lyon, who was also very active in organising SCBWI events, and and that was sort of held at her house, and we had a fantastic illustrator who came in, and we learned from him for the weekend, taught us lots of things, and I sort of so now I sort of knew how to do a children's book, so I really wanted to have a go at like doing one, and Chris came with the script, and actually it was about what I'd learned, the right length, 32 pages, so I immediately sort of was like, oh yes, I can slice this up into the right number of pages, and think about this spread and that spread, and I did it very, very quickly. But it came out pretty good. I was pretty happy with it. And Chris has written quite a nice story, but it sort of I don't know, it doesn't have a meaning or anything much about that. Chris was quite, Chris didn't want his story to have much of a meaning.
Yeah, I mean, I had read, so I think my daughter she was young, but I had read quite a few children's books at that point. And a lot of the newer ones I didn't like, mostly because the older ones were classics. So they were already the cream of the crop. And when we were doing these tours of schools, which, I think we all did, right? You look at all these schools, they bring you in, they give you their pitch. The pitch is always really good. But what I learned to do is not so much listen to the teachers, because all the pitches were good. What I learned to do is look and see if the kids were engaged or not. So from my perspective, I wasn't trying to teach kids how to learn or learn how to read. I wasn't trying to teach them a moral lesson. I was just trying to engage them. Obviously, like in a healthy way. I didn't want them to be engaged with I wasn't going to show I don't know, like slaughtering animals or something like that and engage them that way. But all I really wanted to do is engage them. And so my thing was kind of like Seinfeld for kids, there really wasn't a point to it, but it was engaging,
Well, it
and
had a
learned a lot.
cupcake theme.
It had a cupcake theme, right? Which
Yes.
was the thing that my wife was doing at the time. She was a kind of a pretty serious cupcake blogger, so that was in the that inspired the cupcake part of it. Yeah, and I oh, thanks, Chuck.
Yeah.
I have I brought a copy here, but I was like, you've got a much better this is much better seeing it on screen. Yeah.
Yeah, it's worked quite well, yeah.
Yeah, so I don't know if there's a lesson in there. I don't know if it teaches kids to read or anything, but
Well, they might, yeah, they probably read it. It's a nice little story
yeah.
about friendship and helping out. Yeah, yeah, no, it's very good. I mean, yes, you can find lots of little moral lessons in there, I'm sure. But yeah, it's not like explicitly sort of like, oh, now we're going to teach you about the importance of hugging or something, which is very
Yeah.
important to everybody.
And what was your collaborative process on that particular book? Did you write the text and just hand it over to Chuck and then wait a few months, or did you work together and kind of art direct or kind of get into it with Chuck?
I mean, I wrote the story down on like a piece of paper one night. The whole thing took like 10 minutes. And I said, if I sober up tomorrow and I think this is still good, I'm going to reach out to like, anybody that I think can do the illustration. And Chuck was at the top of that list. And I was like, well, if he can't do it, that's it. That's the end of it. So he agreed to it. And then I thought it would be simpler than it was, and Chuck kind of had a lot of the structure around it. Like he knew like how the illustration was gonna lay out, like the page layout and how the words were gonna work with the illustrations. And I didn't really understand. I thought I understood that, but I didn't. So
Right.
that was a big help.
Yeah.
And I think Chuck recommended some edits to the story, and we tried them. But the like out the gate story was actually the strongest version, so we came back to something that wasn't that different.
Right.
Yeah, yes,
But
we may have cut it down a little bit, but yes,
you
I mean
know,
it was a good sort of practice, like run through of like, yeah, you'd written what I thought was a pretty decent little story that I was happy to go ahead, and I'd been to the seminar and was really gung ho. So yes, it was good. I learned a lot, but it's probably the only sort of children's book like that really that I've done, as opposed to the search and find books, which have been
Right.
quite popular and successful with kids. But yeah, it's a different sort of thing. So yeah, and getting published, as an author is a very different thing. Like I get like my published work is sort of tends to be through my agent that will send me some work. So what's about like that process of like finding a publisher? How did you find that?
How did I find finding a publisher?
Yes.
It was, I mean, the first one I found was actually through sort of a friend of a friend, and it was Teeny Tiny Trucks, which was my very first. It was with a really small boutique publisher, and I kind of worked hand in hand with them. But I didn't do the illustrations. I just wrote the words and sent it to, and they're long out of business. They lasted a couple years after we published this and a couple other books through them. But my goal was always to eventually get published by like one of the big five. I don't know, are there five now? There's 4 or 5 or 6.
Yeah, they keep merging, so there'll just be one big one.
Oh boy.
And after Teeny Tiny Trucks came out, then I did find an agent through SCBWI at one of those events. And after that, we sold Bitty Bot, which was with Simon & Schuster. This was my first picture book with a major publisher. And
okay.
And this was illustrated by Tad Carpenter, who I'm from Kansas City, Missouri, and he's from Kansas City, Missouri. So I actually got to go back to my hometown when this book came out, and we did some TV spots on the local morning news, and I got to visit my old grade school and read it. So that was a lot of fun too.
Oh, that's good. Well, you're an experienced broadcaster then, yes.
Yeah.
Tim, one thing I would say about like the process between me and Chuck, and this is just a general comment, and I think most creative people learn this after a while. The best situation is when you're collaborating with somebody that doesn't need much direction. It's just their natural instinct and their styles are aligned, and then you just kind of let them do their thing, really. So I mean, if you can find that, and you can't always. I've been in bands for years, and usually that's not the case. But I think like with me and Chuck, it was pretty easy. We're both going in complementary directions, so
Yeah, yeah, yeah. We sort of bounce off back and forth quite easily, I think, and it does depend. But the way that the mainstream children's book publishing works is that they really want you to be either a writer or an illustrator. They don't. If you're a writer, they say, well, you could maybe do some tentpole illustrations in your book, but they don't really want it. They would rather see you as a writer. You submit your script, and then they'll match you with the illustrator because that's just how it is. Unless you are an illustrator who happens to be a great writer. It's probably like the illustrator, you can write your story and illustrate it, but as a writer, they don't want to see half good illustrations. They want they want to match you with someone who can do it properly.
And there really is a bit of a letting go of your text that you have to kind of accept if you're wanting to publish traditionally, because Chuck's right. In those senses, when you send off to an editor, they've got illustrators that they want to work with, or they like to kind of pair your words with kind of the vision and the style that they think would work best to sell the book. And as the author, they kind of prefer that you don't like step in and like say, well, this was what I used a lot of art notes in many of my picture book manuscripts, and oftentimes an editor will redact those or just not even share them with the illustrator, so that that they can have their time to really develop the look and feel without sort of outside influence from the author.
that actually makes a lot of sense to me if they're working with like intuitive people. Like oftentimes, so back to the music thing, because that's where I have most of the experience. But I used to get music from bands, and they'd give me the lyrics, and I'd say, "Don't tell me the melody. Like, let me do this out the gate and see what I come up with. And then if you don't like it, we'll go to your fallback position, which is what you've written." And a lot of times, if you're aligned with the music, that works out better, or works out in a kind of a surprising, refreshing way. But if you hear that, if you get that direction, like if you got those notes, that kind of already frames things up for you a little bit.
Right.
You start to think in the possibilities of the notes. It frames things, and yeah. So I get that.
Now, Chris, you and I are just meeting today, but I've been watching some of the conversations that you all have been having throughout the past few weeks for this campaign. And as I was watching, I saw your little thecitruskids.com on your name tag there. And I was like, well, I'm a musician. I was interested to see, like, I don't even know what the Citrus Kids is. So I was both delighted and horrified to discover your brand of music, which is right up my alley.
I was just thinking about that.
Degenerate music. I don't know. You're like the Beastie Boys or something.
I would say, Mom, maybe don't look up the Citrus Kids until I've heard this playing.
Yeah, Tim, it's interesting that you say that, because just today, for the first time, and we've been doing this for, I don't know, a couple weeks now, I realized Citrus Kids, we're doing a kids book, we're promoting a kids book, and here I have kids in this URL. I'm like, but it is not for kids.
But my whole marketing campaign for this is
Chuck's like not hearing it. I mean, it's hip hop, and it's hip hop without the it's not radio friendly hip hop. It's not Two Live Crew. It's not gangster rap, but it's kind of what I call middle of the road offensive hip hop.
Yeah. I am in. I'm 100% in, and I was delighted by your video for Low Flow, which it only took about 10 seconds for me to go, okay, I get it. I know what this is all about.
Yeah. Well, it's a bunch of middle-aged guys making hip hop, and a lot of our songs are inspired by things that really make us laugh hard.
Yeah.
And a lot of it is in jest, but some of it is not. There's some truth to Low Flow. But yeah, I'm glad I'm glad you appreciated it and understood it. Yeah. I mean that it's pretty over the top. If you watch that 3-minute video and you're not getting what it's about, I don't know. Yeah.
Well, I
Yes,
was also in bands. I was in weird kind of punk rock bands in Texas, and when I was in college. So I feel your vibe. And
okay, yeah, good. Okay, well, you're another punk rocker. We seem to be attracting a lot of punk rockers. Our resident professor Timothy Duran, who he came at the beginning. He's coming back at the end to grade our project. But yeah, he was a Southern California punk rocker. Yes.
awesome.
Yeah, I like a lot of the punk philosophies. I'm not like a huge fan of like punk music. I think the rhythms, I'm more of like I like the rhythms that are in hip hop, which I think is like a hybrid of rock and jazz like put together.
Right.
But the punk philosophies I love. All the like the ideas around punk, like, you know, be independent, do it yourself, think for yourself, question authority, all that stuff. I love. I'd
Mhm.
love to see more of that, you know.
Yeah.
I'd like a new version of punk, you know.
Yes. Well, yeah. Well, it's even time for a commercial break. Itsy Bitsy Spider. There are punks in this book. It's very punk. I made it. I don't know how punk it can be, as it was originally a lot of it originally published by the Daily Mail or children's magazines. But I've got all sorts of different things going on there with music. And my friend's band, the Seagulls, who we had on, they're not exactly punk. Where can we see them? They're in there somewhere.
They've got a rebellious spirit,
Where are
though.
they? There they are.
You know, they're very
Too nice.
kind of like rock and roll, you know, which is similar. Is my take. I don't know how you
they're more
classify
rock and
them.
roll, I guess. But yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
Chuck,
Well,
I have to ask you a couple
Yeah.
questions about Itsy Bitsy Spider. So
yeah. Okay. Great. Yes.
as a new illustrator who I work in Procreate on my iPad, like I don't have an art studio. I have no like prior experience other than being I worked in like graphic design, so I worked in InDesign, and before that Quark, and before that PageMaker.
Yes.
I'm just curious, like really quickly, like those spreads in your books, the seek and find books, are insane. They're crazy. They're amazing. And I just like how do you like I use layers, like many like up to about 50 layers for like one spread. Like, are you working in layers like on a Cintiq? Or
Yes. I do work in layers. Yes. Dale really grilled me on like my process.
Okay, so you've talked about this already.
Yes, I do build it up in layers. You know, so I'll do, especially if it, you know, if it's got a sometimes if it's a beach, I don't really need to sort of do much with the background. But you know, if it's a street scene, then I have to do a lot of perspective. So I'll sort of do a background layer very separately. And then
all those
I'll think
individual
of various
characters, like, do you have them pre-built out, and then you're able to kind of layer the characters wherever you need them?
more or less, right? So I'll collect a lot of reference, and I'll try and think like I don't know, somewhere at like 10 niddles. They're usually like 10 characters, and then you know I'll try and think of 10 sort of little gags that are going on, not necessarily the characters, because I'll usually put the characters in after. So it depends that a little bit, but I'll try and think of you know some sort of things that are going on, and then you know, and then I'll do sort of concentrate on those first, and then sort of build it up around that. You know, like if it's a sort of sea of people, that's relatively easier than you know people doing very specific things.
Yeah.
Dale's got some. He's gonna throw some.
Oh boy, I'm already doing it wrong. I've
Yeah,
only
there
been
we go.
illustrating for like a year and a half, and I'm doing it wrong.
Yeah, Clip Studio Paint. He wants us to use.
Okay,
like screen protector.
it's too late for me. I'm stuck. I'm in Procreate. But
I don't know.
Studio
I think my daughter uses. Is it possible my daughter is that an illustration program? I'm trying to think of what my daughter uses. She's going to like one of the like fine art schools here in San Francisco. It's a high school, and I'm not sure if she uses that package or not. I'm not familiar with it. Is that an Adobe product?
I don't know, but I don't know anything about it. But Dale, would say that Dale knows what he's talking about. So if you're a young artist looking to get started, Dale Sipperly, who is an expert in these things, definitely recommends Clip Studio Paint. But he says get the other apps too. All right. Yes.
Yeah.
Well,
I think I sent that along to Naomi the other day.
You're not on commission anymore, Dale.
Yeah,
All right.
I'm totally making things up as I go along. I am learning as I go, and I just actually finished the second follow-up book for Peach and Plum, and it's like the first book is kind of like my first season of The Simpsons, where they were like still trying to figure out kind of the look and feel, and it's a little rough, and the second book feels much tighter in quality. So I'm really kind of developing everything as I go with these new books. So
Yeah,
I think
I think
it's
it's
a great
sort of the only
idea.
way to do it. Really, the main thing is to do it, and that's my
Yeah.
main advice to
Yeah.
young people.
It's funny going back and looking at those early Simpsons because it's been so long I forgot. But yeah, you can totally tell that it's just not as it's kind of like I love The Simpsons, by the way, but it's like a cruder style.
Sure.
Yeah. Every comic or whatever goes through that. You know, the early ones are sort of quite crude and different. I mean, you can look Garfield. You can look at where he was sort of.
Yeah, that's so true. Yeah, Garfield did look a lot different in the early days.
But then quite quickly, you know, once you're doing it every day, I think you sort of settle in. You settle into how you're doing it. Yeah.
Right. Now, Chuck, did you do your research on the Itsy Bitsy Spider, like where it came from, the history of the Itsy Bitsy Spider? Do you know its origins?
Of the song, the story? No, actually, I didn't. Do you know?
I did. I did a lot of research, which means I actually looked it up on. I looked it up on Wikipedia, which is a whole lot of research that I did. But I learned that there's actually Itsy Bitsy is not what the spider was originally called.
Okay, yes, in England they call him Incy Wincy Spider.
But even before that, it was the Bloomin' Bloody Spider.
Oh, even better.
Yeah, the Bloomin' Bloody Spider went up the water spout.
The Blooming Bloody Spider. That sounds very. Well, I went with the more American. He's an Itsy Bitsy. He's like he's more. You know, I decided that was the broadest one in the end. My English friend, who's a successful artist and musician, James Johnson, he was very insistent I should go with Incy Wincy. He just thought,
oh yeah, well that's classic.
Yeah. That's interesting. There's a lot of these children's things that have like this darker version in the past and they got cleaned up. Like, aren't there like that Pocket Full of Posies, Ashes, We All Fall Down? There's a lot of really dark stuff. Yeah, right. That just
the Itsy Bitsy Spider is like an allegory for the working class trying to make their way up, and then they get pushed down by the water, and the sun is supposed to represent sort of like the false hopes that they will ever make. I mean, this was sort of a dark
oh man,
twisted,
I think that's baked into the story. It's a dark story. He's like struggling. You know, it's also reminiscent of the story. We learned in school of Robert the Bruce or William Wallace or whatever. I guess it was William Wallace. And he's fighting the British, and he goes in his cave, and then he's lost. He retreats to a cave, and he sees a spider crawling up the wall and falling down, and then it tries again, and so then he tries again.
Yeah.
You know, so he's a little spider. He struggles like we all do, climbing up the spout or in the dark, and you come out and you see the vision. Then along comes the rain and washes you down, and you've got to start again. Or Sisyphus rolling the rock up the hill. I mean, it's a sort of that's just life.
Yeah.
you got to.
But the class component is interesting. You know, the class component and that the lower class is represented with a spider. Couldn't it have been like a cute mouse or something? that would have been my version of it.
But there's something.
One of those people.
The mouse thinks more. Like the spider, he just goes ahead and does it.
Oh, okay. It's like a reflex. He's just going to keep on doing it.
We've all seen a spider in the bottom. You know, everybody's sort of seen that little spider struggling away. And like sometimes we flush it down, sometimes we help it out.
Do you guys like, you know, so I see trends in music. Do you guys see any trends in like children's books? Like if you compare the children's books like you grew up with and what's going on today, do you see any interesting trends or changes over the years?
That's a great question. You know, I think they've definitely gotten shorter and faster as attention spans have become shorter. You know, and I also do a lot of critiques for manuscripts, and I see so many that are like 700 to 1,000 words long, and I'm always like, shoot for under 500. And really, if you can get it under 300, even better. Most of my picture books, and I write in rhyme for the most part, are in that sort of 200 to 300 word range. And I think that's, there's exceptions to every rule, but I would say that for the most part, editors are looking for short, quippy, tight, character driven with a nice twist at the end, all in a neat little package in as few words as possible, because you want to make room for the illustrations to do a lot of the heavy lifting.
That makes sense to me because adult media is kind of going that way too. Everything's being compressed, and there's all the fats getting trimmed off of everything. In fact, now there's those services that will take like an hour-long show and show you like the minute or two that you might find exciting.
Right.
You just sign up to the service, and you, instead of watching one show, you watch little pieces of 12 shows. So yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I didn't notice that, but that makes so much sense.
Right. I haven't watched like a full baseball game in 20 years. It's like all I do is watch the highlights on YouTube because that's all I have time. It's like I don't want to sit and watch an entire baseball game, but I'll watch like the highlights of like the home runs and when somebody gets hit and when there's a fight. Then yeah, I'll watch that real quick for 5 minutes while I have a snack.
Or watch it on fast forward, then it's really exciting that everything's happening really fast.
There you go. Yeah, 3 times speed.
Huh. Do you like, so, when I hear about parenting styles, like, I think we all were like kids in the 70s probably. And, we're all aware that like there were less parents watching us, and there was more stuff that we did that would have been considered irresponsible parenting. Do you see any reflection of like the change in parenting values in these books? Like, because I was allowed to just disappear on my BMX for the whole day as long as I showed up before it got dark, and zero parents would do that. And if something happened to their kid these days and they got outed, it'd be embarrassing. They'd be like, this is negligence. This is,
Right.
Oh yes, like parents, like there were some kids that were sort of walking to school or something, and parents got in trouble for that. I don't know. Yeah, it's very complicated. I always say that today's kids, when they grow up, they're going to be much more strict about where their kids go roaming over the internet. They'll be like, "Oh, when we were young, we could go roaming all over the internet." Our parents, we're going to be much stricter now where you go. Yeah.
Yeah, you can't go to that place on Meta, or is that what Facebook is now? Yeah, that world that's going to suck your into it and make their brain mush. You can't go there.
Yeah,
don't go to that corner.
Well, it is a complicated issue, but I think parents do still like want books for their kids and want parents to look at books, and so there's something about reading and the transfer of information. And I don't know. Yes, concentration and attention spans. It's a big issue, isn't it? I don't know. I mean, I think the search books, it's very easy. You can look at them at a very young age, and the kids can sort of look around the pictures and sort of see all this and make their own story. I had a goddaughter, and she would always say what every character is saying. In some books she had that was beautiful little sort of town scenes, not quite as detailed as search scenes, but they were very beautifully drawn, and like people in the town. And she always wanted to say who's saying this and who's saying that. And I thought, well, that they do that, and so you need to give them a little bit of a story though. But I try and give it some sort of purpose. The Itsy Bitsy Spider, it's a story like they go to enter a talent contest, and win the talent contest, they go on the London stage, and then they're sort of celebrities and they go around the world. But by the end, we sort of end up in San Francisco with the monsters attacking the Golden Gate Bridge, and is it all a dream, sort of thing. So it's a little bit of it's a bit of a nonsense tale, but I sort of say some little things about celebrity and fame and the nature of how tiring it all is.
Yeah, and I find that editors are often looking for young, precocious characters that are empowered to solve some sort of problem or obstacle on their own. And what I end up seeing from a lot of authors that are kind of new to the industry is that they're writing a lot of stories about like a grandparent or a parent giving the answers and advice to a young child, which I understand that that's sort of like you're kind of speaking through your own experience and you're wanting to impart that into a child's mind. But really what I think is working these days is to empower the young character to solve the problem on their own in a creative way. In that way, the young child, that's the actual audience, not the adult, but these are for children, can see themselves through the problem that young child character was experiencing. So
It's funny, it
Yes,
reminds me of the
that's
Disney
very
stuff.
key point, isn't it? Yes.
yeah,
The Disney stuff where, like, the parents are just killed in the first 5
yeah,
minutes and
So
like,
yeah,
"Hey, kids,
my friend gets
cut
figure
it
this
out
kidnapped.
of the
stuff
story.
out."
The mom's always
For
dead in
sure,
this.
yeah, you just cut them completely out.
Yeah, yeah,
Kill
they're
'em.
gone now, it's just you and your sister, figure this thing out.
Yeah, totally.
Yes.
Yeah,
But they know that's what
it's
the key. But I
exciting,
think
that's
that's
an
also the
adventure.
same in the fairy tales that Disney started from. You know that usually something pretty horrible has happened. They're now on their own. You're on your own, and it's
I'm
not
like, when
nice
are the
out there.
parents are still alive, it's 10 minutes in, when are they gonna die?
Yeah.
But I don't
No,
think
I mean,
I
that
don't
stuff's
think we want
exciting.
to teach. Yeah, sorry, I don't think we want to teach kids as much. But I don't know. It's very complicated. Like how, like Grimm's fairy tales were definitely designed to teach kids. It's bloody scary out there. Don't go anywhere or do anything, or something really horrible is going to happen.
Right.
You know, now I think we do want to encourage kids more to sort of, you know, be social and interact. You know, you can't be afraid of the world. You know, and I think increasingly, you know, we get a lot of messages to make us very afraid of the world, and you know, there are things to be afraid of for sure. But you know, you have to keep the proportions right. That's a sort of tricky thing. But yeah, the kids got to solve the problem themselves. You know, you've got to, you know, like when you encounter a danger, your first instinct is to run away, but the only solution is to face the danger. You know, the cave that you fear to enter holds the treasure that you seek. And you know, this whole, you know, the hero's journey aspect, it's the sort of powering, the discovering, the growth. You know, yes, when you've got an old character as the center of your story, as you say, they should have already grown. That character can't change.
Right.
You know, change is fundamental in a story. Like a story is all about, you know, somebody going through some sort of change.
So true. Absolutely.
Maybe they get shrunk or something. Find a giant cupcake, I don't know.
Yeah, then they
it's
learn the
interesting
lesson
what you're
not to be
saying.
so smug. That's good. The grandparent gets shrunk, and now they learn that, oh, actually, I should have been thinking differently. Yeah.
But it's really hard as a parent. I have 2 teenagers, and parenting is difficult because you ride a fine line of empowering your kid to be adventuresome and do things on their own and make their own mistakes. But then my instinct is always to like do things for them and to show them the way and to protect them. So anything we can do with picture books or middle grade novels or whatever form it is to show kids that like there's a balance. You want to be responsible, but you also need to go for it and do exciting things and live life and not be afraid to go out and try new things on your own.
Yeah, there's a, you know, Naomi's school, they were always trying to find just right books for the kids. If they're too easy, the kid gets bored. If they're too hard, the kid also tunes out.
Yeah.
And so it's this idea of like a developmentally appropriate things. And when I was reading about childhood development, you know, I mean, really, really little kids, like, you know, 6 months or something like that. A lot of times the parents get ahead with the toys and the toys just aren't useful to the kids because they're not developmentally appropriate. Most parents like rush that along.
Right.
But at each stage of development, there's like things that are, there's kind of a particular type of thing that is the most helpful, you know? And so I forget where I was going with this, but I think it related to what you were saying. I hope it did.
Yeah.
But being appropriate for that particular stage of development. So, you know, as a parent doing everything for your kid, there is a portion of their life where you do everything for them, and then slowly that goes away.
Yeah.
And they get challenged, but in like a safe area. You know what I mean? Like in a safe way, with a safety net. But it's all about kind of like, to me, it's what's appropriate at that time.
Yes, play. I mean, play is, you know, inherent in the animal kingdom, certainly in the mammal world. You know, this is part of learning and growing, is sort of play and exploring and play. And with children, play is sort of real. You know, in a different way. Like when you see 2 lion cubs fighting, you know, they're sort of serious. But somehow children, you know, they know, I don't know, like children are very inherent. They're very good at knowing the difference between reality and not reality, I think. You know, I think where parents tend to be a little bit worried, you know, that, you know, they're seeing this and they think it's reality. But I don't think the evidence is otherwise. I think children are actually very good at telling if something's a fictional story or a real story.
But I mean, these kids these days, let me tell you about kids these days.
Please do. I'm on board.
These three guys of the 1970s, like they're so much savvier now. And of course, it's because they're completely locked into the internet and TikTok and, the YouTubes and all these sources of information. I mean, it's just such a different world to raise a kid in, because they are aware of everything. They see everything online and they get it really quickly. So it's, coming as a kid that was like, grew up in the Star Wars, the original Star Wars era, where there was no outlet to like look up memes and critiques and angry people about Star Wars. It's like we all just loved Star Wars.
Yeah.
So
yes.
yeah.
Yes, I don't know. Well, they still love Star Wars. My son's like, he's 19. He seems to be more in Star Wars. Like he didn't seem that much into it before. Like lately, he's gotten into it. So I guess those Disney people know what they're doing with all the.
Oh, interesting.
shows,
He's getting into it now, huh?
Yeah,
Because
it's kind of
when
funny. He's
Star
more
Wars
into
swept
it
through-
now. Yeah.
Yeah, when Star Wars swept through like in the 70s, I just remember like, so I was in grade school. I don't know what this was, 5th or 6th grade. Everybody had those action figures and people were going back and watching Star Wars again and again. And it was just like all these little like 11, 12-year-old boys just flipped for it.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
it was, I mean, I think like culturally that was more likely to happen there because the media outlets were a little bit more consolidated, like everybody bought Michael Jackson Thriller. I mean, everybody in my class. I don't know if that happens so much anymore. But yeah. It's interesting he's getting into it at 19. You know what I mean? It seems like it would have appealed to him at like 8 or something like that.
Right.
I thought that was the entry point for drums, electric guitar, Star Wars, and a few other things.
Well, okay, but this maybe goes back to a friend of mine. Tim started working for someone who gives financial advice for a living, or like he teaches people about financial advice, how to manage their finances and stuff. And he said that his secret to his success apparently is that people like to be talked to as if they were 12 years old. Which is kind of funny, but actually, I thought, well, actually, that does make a lot of sense because a 12-year-old, pretty much understands everything. I mean, they don't know everything, but they get it. Their view is sort of pure and unclouded, but they're quite capable of comprehending anything that you explain to them if you explain it to them, in a fun and interesting sort of way that doesn't sort of get fogged up with sort of innuendo and other things, I suppose. So I think it was quite a good little Occam's razor. Or that's the word, or whatever. A saw, to just. It really helps me if I don't quite know what my voice is. Like, I would just like think you're speaking like some 12-year-old. They want to hear it. They want to have a look at it. And they want it presented clearly. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's really it's really hard to there are so many outside. You can't just watch a movie and enjoy a movie anymore. There's just so many outside influences coming into how you experience it and where you experience it and who you experience it with and all the references and everything that goes into it. It's like back in the day, we could just see a movie and only see it at the movie theater once, and that was your experience with it.
And now there's
now it was or TV. Yeah, you didn't see it again.
I see what you're saying. Like you would just go see Star Wars, and there wouldn't be like discussions and debates on Twitter and all these communities taking positions and just all this other kind of like I don't know what to call it, like secondary media created around the movie. Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah.
All right. Well, I sort of told people that maybe we would like read from books and sing songs or something. I'm not sure reading books is interesting viewing. Is it? Like, I'd love Tim to read a little bit from something, and
Yeah, can you throw whatever it is up on so they can see it as well, as opposed to just seeing our pretty faces? They can see the illustrations and stuff.
Yes, that would be good.
Is that possible? Sorry. This is
Well,
the whole show's pretty much unscripted except for the opening and closing.
Yeah.
So maybe I'm just putting Chuck on the spot. I'm not sure.
well, I can bring up myself. I can bring up. I don't know, Tim. Is there somewhere? I can.
You know,
So
I was just. Oh, go ahead. Action figures sucked. Star Wars action figures sucked. I like Dale's direct line of communication. Yeah, I agree with you, Dale, but you know, I don't know. It's not a very popular thing to say, but I did not flip over Star Wars as a kid. I thought it was fine. I did not flip over it. But that's true of E.T. and a bunch of other things. I like Jaws, actually, even though it made me vow to never go in the ocean ever because I saw it when I was 7. Because my stepdad took me to that movie. He probably thought it was hilarious to watch me be terrified. But yeah, I there's a whole bunch of childhood movies I didn't flip for. And now I'm trying to make my daughter watch them, like E.T., for example.
Yeah.
I tried to get her to watch E.T. and she stopped watching it like right in the middle. It's like, you know what you're saying about the kids' books being faster? I forgot, you know, how slow E.T. is compared to like a regular, a comparable film from this era.
For
you
sure.
know? I don't have a problem with it, but it's like watching Kubrick now. You know, it's like 2001 all of a sudden.
Yeah, my 16-year-old, I've been taking him through all the like the 80s horror and sci-fi. We watched those together. And then I was like, here's a classic. Let's watch The Godfather. And he just could not take it. It was so slow. And I'm like, this is considered one of the top 3 greatest movies of all time. And he just absolutely did not care a whit about it. And I've seen it probably 10 times and like love every little beat of it. And no, there's it's too slow.
Tina and I did a binge through the Godfather series over the pandemic. We did 1, 2, and 3, and actually doing it right through 1, 2, and 3. 3 sat perfectly well at the end to me. I think it was the people didn't like it because it had been so long and they got so confused. If you just like, I came to it fairly because it had been a long time since I saw it, so I forgot most of it. So just sat down and went 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, and 3 seemed like a good little. I mean, you could say, well, maybe it wasn't totally necessary, but I thought it fit on the end pretty well. Yeah. So
yeah.
But you know, I'm always controversial about. Like, I love the movies other people hate.
So why was Godfather 3 controversial? I mean, I don't. I've seen them all, but I don't know why it was controversial.
I mean, it was when it came out, nobody like people wanted it. Like the Godfather 1 and 2 were so well established as the greatest movies ever.
Yeah.
Like no matter what you did, you know, it was going to be like, oh, that's not as good.
Yeah, that's a tough position. I don't know where you go from there. You know, only down, I think. I mean, Godfather 2 is one of those rare sequels where some people actually think it's better than the original, but that just about never happens.
Yeah.
You know,
Empire Strikes Back.
Is that one too?
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
It's considered almost. There's debate whether Star Wars or Empire is better, but
yeah, I mean, I like them equally.
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
That's worth 0.
Yeah. Well, my son loves the first era. Like, you know, they like 6 years old, they watch Phantom Menace. So they like that best. And, you know, he's definitely, I definitely like that, you know, Clone Wars era the best. You know, that's where all the interesting things were. It was a more civilized age. You know, things weren't so good when the Empire was in charge.
Yeah.
Well, getting exposed that young, I just feel like what it does to you emotionally, you know, it has such an impression on you at that age, and you're very, you know, stories are more novel to you. You haven't seen the same stories repeated over and over again, and you are much more likely, or it's easier to suspend belief. When I saw Raiders of the Lost Ark, I thought it was totally credible. I thought all that stuff was doable, which what was one of the reasons I liked it so much. I was like, here's a real person doing this real stuff in this real. Then you see it again in your 30s and you're like, oh man, half of this stuff could never happen.
Right.
You know, it was much less enjoyable.
But it was more real than we've seen it before. He was taking those sort of 50s sort of images, Boy's Own Adventure, and he was putting them updated and making exciting special effects. And there's something about Spielberg as well, like just even that, like his little characters have sort of so much personality. Somebody who's just sort of on screen for a minute or has a line, they're like, there's something about them that sort of feels like, oh, that's a real person, So I don't know. Yeah, that's just the magic of that. It's still great. And all ages can love it too. Like I remember my dad really loved it, and I was quite young and loved it. And that's sort of nice when, and then if you can make an entertainment that's all ages, that's very hard.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of key. Like, so I didn't really think I like kids' entertainment, and then you have a kid, and then you're going to watch a lot of it. So if you can get the parents to enjoy it as well, what was it, Toy Story, which was the thing that kind of opened this up to me. I said, oh, hey, my kid likes this, and I do too. Well, who gets the kid in the theater? The parents do. It can't be bad for box office if the parents don't mind seeing it 3 times in a row.
Right, exactly. Yeah, the parents have to like it. All right, so I don't know. So what's it like? I mean, can we talk more though about like the construction of story, because we sort of said we'd like to talk about that a little bit. So yeah, we've talked also about the hero's journey of that. So how do you set about like creating a story, Tim? Like, what is your sort of first seed or tend to be? I mean, does it vary or?
Oh, it certainly varies. But I think it always goes back to just finding a character in conflict. I mean, story comes from a character needing to achieve something and having to overcome a problem. And if there's no problem, then there's no story. Now that there's concept picture books where it's like, you're kind of getting an idea across to a young audience. But in terms of like, if we're talking about story, like the hero's journey, as you mentioned, like really it comes down to finding a strong character with a strong point of view that really needs something really badly and can't get it at the beginning of the story, but finds a creative way to get it at the end. And so that's how I always approach, like when I'm writing my stories, trying to think of obstacles to throw at my characters.
Yes. Yes. All right. So yes, that's very much the sort of the sort of the hero's journey approach. Yes. They're driven out of the cave. The cave person driven out of the cave by their wanting. Really, is the like as Buddha tells us. We need to be not in a state of wanting, because they were stuck in a state of wanting. So you want something. So you have to leave your place of comfort. Yeah. You encounter the series of trials, increasingly bad obstacles, till you finally confront the goddess, who will give you the boon that you sought.
Yeah.
In the final trial, get the boon that you sought. You will return. Then you will return home, but you will have been changed in the process. So home will not be the place that you left, because you've changed. Home changed.
Chuck, what does the itsy bitsy spider want?
Well, he wants to get up that spout.
When he gets up
that
spout,
yes, he goes up the spout and down again. So I don't know why. I think that just seemed like a good sort of metaphor. He's a little intrepid character, but yes, I don't do it in that explicit of a way. He's sort of there. He's there with his fairy tale friends. They enter a talent contest. So I guess they wanted to win that. They do win it, and then they sort of become celebrities. And now they're sort of touring the world, sort of going on this sort of world tour. And it's all a sort of kind of crazy whirlwind. And I sort of end it with more of a sort of like an explosion. Like early Muppets, he would always end everything with an explosion, really before the Muppet Show, when he was sort of like he would do little TV idents and things. And he would always just end it with something blowing up. So I don't know. I was going to sort of have a more calm ending. I was sort of going to put the cricket scene at the end at one point, where it was sort of like, okay, now we're all going to relax and be calm. But my friend was like, oh no, you should end it with the big sort of sci-fi San Francisco scene, and just end it with a big bang. And then all the crazy cosplayers. So I'm just telling a story about diversity and everybody getting on, and yes, I don't know. There's no direct points to it particularly. I mean, because I didn't set it out. I had sort of had the scenes and I sort of put them together, and I think it reads through as a nice little story.
Mm-hmm.
But yes, I do. They encounter obstacles on the way. What are they looking for? I don't know. They sort of get what they want quite early on in the story, because they won the talent contest, and so the payoff is really yes. I might. Yeah. I'll have to think about it.
thinking about Seinfeld again in like context of what you're saying, Tim, that somebody is presented with this problem, they have to find a creative solution to it. Would you see something like Seinfeld as
Hmm.
like a series of like mini episodes of that? Like Kramer can't get the right frosting on his cupcake, so they spend
Right.
5 minutes on that, and there's these kind of little just absurdities of life, but they are solving these little problems that they're having. It's not the big like major track that you're talking about, like, which is kind of like more epic, right? But they are kind of doing this throughout an episode, like woven together. I don't know.
That's what makes interesting scenarios and where surprise happens when if it's even just like the little series of small things to overcome. It's how a character like Kramer would approach a weird little problem versus how Elaine would approach it. And it's like understanding that character and seeing how they solve it in their own weird, twisted way is how we come to love those characters. And that's a big part of the children's book industry. It's like you want to relate and love a character, even if they're flawed. And it's much more interesting to have flawed characters who do things that they shouldn't do, but they do them anyway because they don't know any better, but it makes us feel good because we know better. And seeing how they surprise us, even with like what you're saying, like these small episodic, like that's what I think, I've never written for television and I've never been in that particular world, but I imagine that they're constantly like coming up with like scenarios and how can we throw a monkey wrench into this simple scene to make it interesting and funny and relatable.
Yes, every scene should have like a turn. This is sort of like, and there's a good book called Story that's like all about sort of screenwriting and story and stuff. But yes, in there they say that, every scene, wherever the premise is at the beginning, something is being reversed by the end. So that's kind of interesting. Yes. So yeah, I mean, definitely with Itsy Bitsy Spider, every page is its own scene. There are lots of sort of little things, but but part of it though is because it's a sort of a game or a puzzle. Like games or puzzles are slightly constructed. I love Dungeons and Dragons role-playing games, and yes. So there you sort of construct a scenario, but how it results is sort of like down to the person, how they approach it and what they're looking for. So there's definitely an element of that I like about the Itsy Bitsy Spider's puzzle books or mazes or something like that. Even I've done sort of maze books, and in a maze there's more direct goal. You're trying to get from A to B. But there's all sorts of funny things can happen on the way. Yeah, I quite like me. Yeah, there's definitely I'd like to do maze book somehow. I've done some simple. I'd like to do. Wizard Pickles was sort of that. That's well, that's kind of when I met you, Tim, when I was sort of going around with that, and I definitely learned a lot about shaping Wizard Pickles into a story. At the beginning it was like a series of puzzles, and from going to the SCBWI lectures and stuff like that, and talks and meetups, and we did like Asilomar is in like a peer review group where we all looked at each other's and made notes and things like that. And yes, that was all like phenomenally helpful in like sort of figuring out what the story should be, giving the central character, having her want something, try and go for it and reach resolution, and try and do that all within the context of like having puzzles. So yes.
Is there in Itsy Bitsy Spider, like I know like there's a spread where there's a marriage proposal in Trafalgar Square? Is that?
Oh yes.
So like, are there any? Can you tell like one other sort of like Easter egg in one of your spreads that like nobody would actually know from like the cover, like some little scene or character that you threw in there that's, I mean, there's thousands of characters doing all these different things. It's just kind of an astounding book. If I can pitch it to the world,
yes.
I mean, it's just like, you have to see these books that Chuck does. It's brilliant. I mean, A, they're just fun and colorful. B, they are puzzles that like a child or even an adult sitting with a child or just by yourself, like looking at these, like at all the detail and trying to find that spider. And you've done other books with other characters, but It's just mind-boggling the amount of work and detail. They're beautiful spreads,
Yeah.
and so many different like little characters to find. And I'm just curious, like in your like, what have you done to kind of entertain yourself to keep from going mad? I can only imagine.
Oh yeah, no, we're all mad here. I don't know. I mean, yes, there's loads of little vignettes. Okay, so this was quite a big scene. So this was the last one I did in the summer of 2020 for the Daily Mail. And they gave me the scenes that they wanted. So they wanted something like a tennis tournament, like a Wimbledon sort of thing.
Yeah.
So the idea of the tennis match here, and I'm trying to sort of think. So she's sort of hitting the ball, he's bouncing, and then it's hitting the umpire on the head.
Well,
and
he's originally
he was reading the Daily Mail. Now he's reading Where's Itsy Bitsy Spider.
Yeah.
So the ball's bouncing off his head, so he sort of missed the point, and everybody's cheering. And then again, you can sort of see him on the big screen up here. And I was pointing out to Dale the other day, I removed all the little Emanata lines of the balls moving on the video screen. That's like a tiny little thing that only I would notice.
Did I see
a lot of people I knew in
background?
What's that?
Is that Stonehenge in the far background?
Yes, there's a bit of Stonehenge. All right, you see this little pub back here? The little pub in the distance. That's Barton's Mill pub in near where I grew up, near Basingstoke in England. I guess this is Basingstoke. It's not very accurate. It's somewhat Basingstoke. So the countryside, somewhat near where I live, somewhat near Stonehenge, somewhat near the south coast. But then over here, I've got Newcastle in the top corner for some reason. I guess that's the other end of England. I'm showing the length and breadth of England.
That's awesome.
So there's all sorts of little things. I don't know. Can you?
I know. Are these any of the findable listed things in the book, Chuck? Are these like bonus things?
These are sort of bonus things, but then when I do the solutions in the back, sometimes I'll call out some of the things. I give it a name, so that then you can find it. Those are more little sort of Easter eggs for myself more than anything, I suppose. Then another scene. I mean, this was quite a general scene of the beach scene. So many sort of things going on here. This tubby guy, he's sort of fairly famous from a sort of seaside postcard sort of character. I don't know. They're the little things that repeat, like the Punch and Judy show I have sort of going through.
There's a kid that's getting their toe snapped by a crab there by the volleyball net.
Yeah, she's awesome. Right timing. Yes, this person has got the seaweed chasing the other kids out. I know. I quite like this guy building the sandcastle. I don't know sometimes what's going on. He's making his sandcastle, little goatee beard.
That's the guy with the rake behind his back.
Hi, can I help you? But he's sort of hiding the rake behind his back for some reason, which makes me feel like he's going to destroy the car. I don't know what that conversation's all about. And then meanwhile, these kids are about to run over and knock over the castle.
Chuck, how did you realize that this was something that you could do or would do? Like, was this a first? Like, did you get an assignment to do one spread one time for a magazine, and you just enjoyed it, or like I'm speculating here, but like,
so I had done a few.
How does one get into creating a whole bunch of these seek and find books?
Yes. So, it's a good question. Yes. So I used to do my webcomic, Pewful, which we were talking about, and I'd done some over the years, some sort of big busy scenes. I'd always been sort of familiar with Waldo. I've always sort of thought, I can do that. I've sort of done things a little like that. I always thought like Where's Waldo himself needed more of a sort of story or something. So, that's when I did Wizard Pickles, I really sort of tried to do that. And then I did my board game Legitimacy, and I had sort of done the boards like that. And then this one that's in Itsy Bitsy Spider, I'd originally done it as a cover for a comic book anthology. Comic book guide to the mission. And that one came out very Where's Waldo, without me really planning it to. It's just I wanted to put all these sort of things in there, and it ended up being like that. And then once I had that in my book, I got offered to do them. And so I did a few different ones through my agent, and I did like magazines as well, like children's, like what was it called? Like Faces magazine from Cricket Publishing. I was doing like back cover activities for them. Like, so I do like a puzzle on the back cover. And so I sort of got into that, and then I got asked to do the Where's the Penguin from that publisher in the UK. So they had a few others, and they needed somebody to sort of do that one, I guess. And so I did that, and so I did a few through them. So yes, it just sort of evolved over time, really. But yeah, I don't know. There was suddenly, I don't think there was ever a moment where I thought, oh, that's what I want to do. But definitely, like, oh, I think I could do that. I think I could do a good job.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's really impressive, and as a children's writer who's still kind of finding his way through becoming an author illustrator, it's inspiring to see that kind of level of work. And I can only, if I can quickly equate it to my own work, I have one spread from it's the final spread of Peach and Plum, where I did not nearly to the level of complexity as yours, but look at how many characters I put into this spread. And like I did put like this guy going up here is a sumo citrus, which was inspired by the fact that like my son, we discovered sumo citrus. I don't know if you know what sumo citrus is.
No.
Well, no.
It's this.
No.
I maybe they've been around forever, but they're these forms of oranges that are really wrinkly and have these sort of top knots on them, and they're delicious oranges, and the skin kind of peels off really easily, and they're super fun to eat. And my son loves them, so I put a sumo citrus going up the roller coaster there. And so I'm no Chuck Whalen, but
okay, I did do one that's a bit similar to that one, not in its.
Let's see it. Let's see it. I don't your version of my amateur illustration. I got to see it.
I'm going to try and find the one that I did that's quite similar to that.
That word balloon, Dale, did not have an outline. None of my word balloons have outlines. Am I supposed to have outlines?
Okay.
No, but the characters do.
I didn't even think about this idea of outlines versus like no outlines. And you're saying that there's less outlines in kids' books, and I don't really even look for that stuff. But
it's like in picture books, like for sort of younger kids, I think it's just more the stuff. There's a sort of different thing between like a cartoon. I mean, it's not a hard rule by any means. And there's all sorts of variations, but yes, there is a sort of a line somewhere between a sort of children's book illustration, and a cartoon or a comic book illustration.
Yeah.
And most of those books.
I think there's a lot of crossover now, though, too. I mean, I'm sure you could make a picture book with blind characters.
Yeah, we used to have a lot, but they've all been donated now, and I've only got the ones that I like. I mean, of course, my daughter she's not sentimental about anything, because she's young, I think, but I only kept the ones that I like, and most of them are actually the books from my childhood.
Yeah.
It's like, The Night Kitchen and that type of stuff. And but Shel Silverstein, that guy, he's fascinating to me.
Yeah.
Oh,
there we go.
Yes. So this was a sort of a theme park one. I don't know why. It was a maze when I was doing the children's magazines, and it's in I got a couple of books I put together. Fruity Land. So there are all these sort of slightly creepy, fruity mascots that are walking around. You've got to try and get from the entrance to the crazy coaster, but the kid's frightened of the fruity mascots, so you don't want to go past any of them.
That is awesome.
So it's like a terrifying Disneyland.
Yes, there's sort of strange fruity things. Yeah, they're slightly disturbing to children.
What about that fruit with a 5 o'clock shadow? What fruit is that? Is that an eggplant?
This one, yes, he's like a sad eggplant. I don't know.
Which is a fruit, I believe.
It's a bit silly, again, like the thing is, okay, this is an earlier one you can see, and I'm like, you know, and for what they were paying me, it was a lot of work. So
Yeah.
they really wanted
I'm
just a very
aboard.
simple maze. I'm making it way more difficult for myself.
Crazy Costa.
I don't know what I think he's a pear. He's a sad pear.
I imagine, Chuck, when you're doing this stuff, you're kind of in like the flow or the zone. There's a bunch of words for it, but it's kind of where you lose track of time, and it's not like you're like, oh God,
Yes,
I'm on.
absolutely.
Yeah. So that's super important. If you can get in that flow state, which is always my goal, and does not happen most of the time. But if you can get in that flow state, you kind of lose track of time, you lose yourself, and you're just doing things. So you're not like, I'm on number 30 of 80 characters I'm drawing, right? Instead of like, you're
Yes.
counting things off.
Well, it's definitely a thing about being a professional, though, is that you sort of have to do it no matter what. And I've been saying this a bit recently, but like Frank Herbert, who wrote Dune, I was listening to an interview with him, and he said, like, when he read back on it, he couldn't tell the difference between the bits that had come out really easily and the bits that he really sweated over. And I think that's generally true. You can't, like, if you're just looking at it and you've forgotten, you can't remember, and the reader can't remember.
Well,
Sometimes bits that you sort of sweat over and find difficult, like the reader thinks, like, oh, those are the best bits. The bits that you think came out really easily, perfect. They're like, I don't care about that. You can't say. It's very hard to judge your own work, And Andy Warhol has a good quote. It's like, make art, and while other people are deciding if it's any good or not, make more art.
I totally.
It's for other people to decide if it's good.
I totally agree with that. In the music world, the trick that I have and other people have is to basically finish it and walk away and come back in 2 weeks. Don't think about it at all, and you'll regain some perspective. I don't think you've got the perspective of an outsider, somebody that's never listened to it, but you'd be surprised how much you gain just by not looking at it for 2 weeks. Because that's a real danger, right? I think losing perspective.
Yes. Well, we've been going for like over an hour and 10 minutes. It's been very, very fun. I don't know if Tim can hang around anymore, but I would love to hear you guys play a little bit on your guitars.
Oh,
or something. We'll play around the Bitsy Spider.
I can play something.
or something. I don't know. You guys are musical. I'm not musical.
I'm sure this will go
appreciator.
Totally smoothly here.
I'm missing all sorts of nice.
Chris, really quickly, okay, so you're a musician. Say just really quickly in a nutshell, like, what do you? We don't know each other at all. Like, other than Citrus Kids, what do you do? What's your thing?
Well, I used to be in advertising with Chuck, and then when my daughter was born, I like quit. And then the plan was I was going to watch her for a few years, which turned into forever. So, but along that time, I've taken on various like music, like creative projects, mostly as like stuff that I like, not that stuff that pays. So I'd say kind of like music is my main thing.
That's cool.
Is that the question you had?
Yeah. No.
Okay. Yeah. It's mostly music, and now I've gone from like this evolution that you see a lot of people doing, where they start off as like a singer or a drummer, and then they get into the writing of it, and then they get into the recording engineering, and finally they get into the producer role, where you can play a couple instruments well enough, and you can put a song together. Yeah. So that's I'm producing the Citrus Kids stuff, and I've produced some other stuff. This project called Merch. So that's kind of what I'm mostly interested in doing these days.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice. Cool. So, we've never rocked out, but we've never jammed before. I brought my ukulele. I have my accordion. I don't know if we can literally play live at the same time together.
I mean, if we could, I'd be amazed, because me and my band have already tried this a bunch of times. There's usually the latency on it screws everything up.
It would be painful for anybody watching to decipher.
We've been trying over the pandemic, and even our best success was not a success. We basically stopped doing it. It's really hard to get. You need extremely low latency to play together, and it's just really hard to do.
Yes, plus you're doing it. It's trying to take the sound from one end and the sound from the other. It doesn't know which one to give priority because it's trying to only give priority to one at a time. So yeah.
30 years from now, maybe. Who knows? I do a lot of school visits virtually, and I will get out my instrument and I'll say, like, now let's sing the ABC song together, and it's just absolute cacophony because oftentimes it's like 4, 5, 6 classrooms watching me and I have to kind of like not listen to them because I'm hearing like 6 different versions of 6 classes singing the ABC song at slightly different times while I'm going A, B, C, D, E. I'm just trying to plow through it, and it's fun, but it's not for consumption.
I totally relate to that. For conversations, like 400 milliseconds of latency is no big deal. That answer comes a little slower. You hear the question a little later. But music is so precise. It ends up being a train wreck, and they are going to work it out someday. We have everybody has these big, thick fiber optic cables going around. So I mean, I'll try it. If you want to throw out some chords, I'll play it. We'll see what Chuck hears. I also
Dale wants some accordion here. So
okay.
I saw the request for accordion, so I'll crack it out. Itsy bitsy spider went up the water spout. Down came the rain and washed the spider out. Out came the sun and dried up all the rain. The itsy bitsy spider went up the spout again.
Oh, I love it. Oh, that's
about as good as
my God!
I know.
I'm sure that was totally out of sync.
Something similar that takes me back.
I dig accordions. I had one for a while, and then I got it for my wife. We watched Amelie. Amelie.
Oh yeah,
It's got all that. What's the accordion music? The French accordion music.
Yeah.
But that style of playing. I bought her one, and then she never took the lessons, and then it just sat around. And I was like, I really don't like instruments sitting around that no one uses. So let's get it back in the hands of someone who'll use it. But I had one for maybe like 6 years. It made it onto a few recordings.
Very cool. I had about 7 accordions at one time.
Oh wow!
And had over the course of moving from like Texas to New York to Colorado to California, I've had to shed a few. But I got this one in Dallas back in the 90s when I was in a band playing kind of weird Texas punk rock music. I was a punk rock accordion dude. So yeah, found it in a box and have loved it ever since. And I take it to schools, and it gets kids' attention very quickly. It's like you show up with a red accordion and start singing weird songs to them.
Yes. Oh yes. Yeah. I remember my preschool teacher. She would come in with the accordion. I mean, it's still very vivid in my memory. This is like really early elementary, like really more like daycare. It's very early memories of like that big accordion. Yeah.
Yeah. It's a bit much to lug around, but
yeah, you didn't just pop it out of your pocket then. Yes.
No.
Okay, here we go.
Well,
A group of accordions is called a poker of accordions. I don't know about that. All right, well, we'll have to look that one up. All right, look, we didn't do any reading, but Tim, I see you have like readings on your website here. Like you've got some official trailer and read and learn video. So I'm going to post that link in the comments here.
Cool, thanks.
People can.
Yeah, there's video. I have videos of me reading some of my books, kind of with kind of some fun additional supplemental material that parents can put their kids in front of and enjoy.
Do you read them at like school libraries, or like what is this? Is that where that goes down? Where do the readings occur? Are they at schools, I assume, or is it like a public space? Or
you mean these videos?
Online? Yeah.
The videos are all like me just around San Jose, either at home or in different locations. Just read. When the pandemic hit, everybody kind of was like, we need content for our kids who can't go to school. And I kind of jumped on the bandwagon of, there were just a ton of authors who were like, I'll read my books and you can, you know, share them with your kids to pass the time. And so I, you know, spent, you know, making videos and doing these kinds of live streams and things. It takes time. It just doesn't happen. And you got to edit them. And I had music and all that kind of stuff. So, yeah, they're just kind of author read videos that I do. Yeah, like, and then I've done some for Simon and Schuster, the Read and Learn. And,
Did I see Dinosong in there?
Dino Song is probably in there somewhere.
Yeah, that's right.
That's my trailer video. I do music for my trailers.
I'm playing it now.
Yeah, so I like to make little trailer like jingles. I love to do jingles, just short little. Maybe it's the former advertiser in me.
We were all in It's interesting. We were all in advertising.
Yeah,
to some degree. I mean,
Well,
we were
I
like
think
doing online stuff, but I don't know if you were doing traditional or not, Tim.
Yeah, I was doing like direct mail flyers for Western Union and
yeah.
I mean, kind of that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I did a certain amount of direct mail at one point. Yeah,
we were making some banner ads.
Yep, banner ads.
Yeah, the banner ads. Yeah, we got into direct mail to banner ads. And years, yeah. But you know, there's a lot of great creative people. I met a lot of great people in advertising. You know, and I'd like to do a Mad Men show where we get some of those people, some of the people we work with back on again.
Yeah, a lot of characters in advertising. I mean, at least in this small little circle of advertising in San Francisco that I was in, I was mostly, you know, at the end when I got out of it, it was mostly the people that made it fun. You know, a lot of the fun clients went away when things crashed. But a lot of the people were interesting.
Yeah.
Are you in San Jose, Tim? I thought you were up in Marin for some reason. You're down in San Jose?
I'm in San Jose, California.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Here we go. All right. And yes, Dale says nice dinos, and I agree with him. Those were very nicely drawn dinos. Who was the illustrator on those?
So that's Richard Smythe. He's actually a fellow British illustrator, I suppose.
Oh yes.
He still lives over there. He and I originally did Water Song together, which was sort of one of my biggest critical successes. People really loved Water Song. It's all onomatopoeia. It's just 56 words of sort of the story of this fox going through a rainstorm. And then I did the follow-up to that, which was Dino Song, and it's in a similar style, but with dinosaurs.
Yeah, and it was so great when you sang it. Actually, that was quite. I've not really quite heard anything like that where it was just the sounds and on the onomatopoeias. Yeah, lovely. Yeah,
cool.
Is onomatopoeia like just syllables that rhyme? Is that what that is?
No, it's words that sound like the sounds they describe. So
okay.
Crinkle, crackle. Sound like crinkling, crackling. So words that describe sounds and
cock-a-doodle-doo, that type of thing.
Yes. So yes. Wasn't there one about like a rooster? I thought now like you can like in different languages, the same like the rooster's word is called different. That's sort of ringing a bell there. Yes, like you know you can in French it's this, in Japanese it's that. Yeah. Dale's asking, are you familiar with Hickleby's children's bookstore in Willow Glen?
I am so familiar. I live in Willow Glen, and I live almost walking distance. I usually drive, but I can walk in 20 minutes to Hickleby's, and they are an amazing, long-lasting independent children's bookstore right downtown in Will Glen's, just sort of like a suburb of San Jose, but it's very charming. And yeah, Hickleby's is sort of like a long-standing, iconic shop. And I go down there, and if anybody ever orders my books through Hickleby's website, then I can go down and personally sign those books before they ship them off to you. So little plug for hicklebys.com. If you want any books by Tim McCanna, including my upcoming books, order them through a local indie bookseller like Hickleby's. And if you go through them, I'll sign your books for you.
All right, I'm going to put a link to Hickleby's in there. Yes, no, okay, this is a whole other conversation about like you know, distributing and bookshops and all this sort of stuff. Yes, well, yes, well, I don't know if we're doing more of these in the future, but yeah, this has been a great conversation. I mean, yeah, I think there's probably like an hour and a half. That's a good time. You know,
that's been really fun.
I start to fade.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on, Chuck. And yeah, it's been...
Well, thanks for coming, Tim. It's been great. Yes, and I think we probably do have more to talk about. And yeah, well, Chris and I are talking about if we're going to do some more shows into the future. You know, we like to, you know, have you back again if we do, for sure. Yes.
And go to the Kickstarter and support Itsy Bitsy Spider, because that's sort of the whole point of this. Is
yes. Thank you for helping me.
Yeah, and also if the Itsy Bitsy Spider is kind of the entry point, I don't know if people realize this, but Chuck's got a huge body of work. So if you like Itsy Bitsy Spider, remember there's this big catalog around it, which is also really good stuff.
Yes, yes, and you can find Tim and I on Amazon. Let me put some links into that there as well. What have we got here? There we go. That's Tim on Amazon, and I might be on there somewhere.
Yeah, I was going to say, Tim, is there a URL? But I see it's already in the.
Yeah, I'm at TimMcCanna.com. That my website I built in like 2009 using Blogger, which is a Google product, and it looks like it, but I need to update it, which I'm planning to do soon. But yeah, most of my stuff is at TimMcCanna.com.
Well, I like those websites actually.
They're
I don't
cheap
like the
and
ones
simple.
And they load fast. Some of the newer formats are these huge images, and sometimes you don't have great bandwidth. I've noticed there's this trend in just these giant images, like 3 words and all these images that you scroll down through. My website is also super old school.
Well, yeah, I use WordPress for mine now. It took me a while. A few years ago, I just like really got in, and yeah, it's fairly easy once you get the yes. You know, WordPress, I recommend it for websites. Yes, it's worth figuring out. All right. Yeah. All right. So, yes. So, Dale says goodbye to you. Awesome to meet you, Tim. Let me know if you want to talk iPad software.
Oh,
really check out Nomad Sculpt 3D and Handy and VizRef.
All right. I will. For sure.
All right. Thanks, Dale. Thanks, Tim. All right. I'm going to.
Thanks, Tim.
All right.
Thanks,
I'm
Dale.
going to play the video now.
Chris and Dale.
You too.
Thanks for joining us, everybody. All right. See you next time.
I'm just going up this water spout, y'all. Y'all, hope it don't rain.
The itsy bitsy spider climbed up the water spout. Down came the rain and washed the spider out. Out came the sun and dried up all the rain. So the itsy bitsy spider climbed up the spout again.
I'm just going up this water spout, y'all. Hope it don't rain. I'm an itsy bitsy spider. I'm also a good hider. Y'all ain't gonna find me.
The itsy bitsy spider climbed up the water spout. Down came the rain and washed the spider out. Out came the sun and dried up all the rain. So the itsy bitsy spider climbed up the spout again.
It's going up this
Up the spout again.
It's going up this
Up the spout again.